What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 37 deadline. So I'm going to go through the latest press conference information and then answer some of your questions as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's jump into it. So this time last week, I was talking about how Rashford had a leg injury and that he was a doubt for Game Week 36. But for most of us, we should probably just keep hold of him because of the double in 37, and also because a lot of us had good benches in Game Week 36. Then we see earlier on this week that he's back in training. I'm thinking happy days, definitely going to start against Bournemouth. Well, maybe not. He's a doubt again, this time with illness. And this is what Ten Hag said. Rashi trained well the whole week, but today he reported he is ill. We have to see how he recovers during the day and see tomorrow. So he hasn't been ruled out of the Bournemouth game, but we don't know what the illness is, how bad it is, and what the chances are of him playing tomorrow. The one kind of positive thing is Ten Hag wasn't as negative as he was last week. Like they said, going to see how he recovers during today, which is Friday, and then see tomorrow on Saturday. Last week, he said he's a big question mark, and when he was pushed on it, he said Rashford's doubtful, more than doubtful. So it did look like he was going to miss out. I don't know if that's the case this week. What I will say is, someone who's a Rashford owner, I'm probably going to keep him, because there's a chance he starts against Bournemouth, or is involved one way or another. If it is just illness, presumably he's definitely going to be back for Chelsea at home, and I'm pretty sure he's going to also start the last day of the season. So I'm hoping he gets at least 2 starts of the next 3, possibly even starts all 3. And I just don't know, for me, if there's another move that's better that I can do in one transfer. Now, I don't have much money in the bank. If I did and I could go from one move to like an Anthony or a Mahrez, I would definitely consider it. But for me, it takes 2 moves, and I'm just not sure I want to do that. I think I'd rather have 2 transfers in Game Week 38. And I do think this week it's more likely that he plays than doesn't, whereas last week it was probably more likely that he would miss out. So we'll have to wait and see. He only reported this illness today, so that's not great. Will he have recovered by tomorrow? Possibly. If you were someone that was thinking about captaining Rashford as a differential, this would probably put me off enough to go somewhere else, either for a Man City player and hope they start twice, or even perhaps someone like Bruno Fernandes instead. That's for people that don't want to go for Haaland. I'm going to discuss that again a little bit later on. The only other kind of people to think about are those that don't own Rashford, that were thinking about bringing him back. You could use this as an excuse not to do it, especially for anyone that is looking to kind of climb up the ranks or has a big gap to kind of chase down in a mini league. If you were thinking about buying him back, you could now go for a more differential player. I'd be pretty surprised if Anthony doesn't start all 3 games if you want to stick to Man United. Also, if you're someone that owns him and you want to go massively differential, this could be an excuse to bet against his really high ownership. The flip side is, of course, he might start against Bournemouth, which is a great fixture, and against Chelsea, which is also a pretty good fixture, and score in both games and really punish you. But they are the kind of risks you have to weigh up towards the end of the season. So the kind of headline news is Rashford is a doubt. For my team, I'm probably going to keep him, although I need to give this a little bit more thought before tomorrow's deadline. I think for most people, unless you've got a good transfer in one move, you might as well just hold on to him and hope for the best. Because worst case scenario for me is that he plays Chelsea and Fulham and just misses out Bournemouth. Not ideal, but there's not a huge amount of kind of dead cert guaranteed points returners in this double anyway. So if you own Rashford, let me know in the comments below, what are you going to do? So just a little bit of Arsenal news, which we kind of already knew about because David Ornstein has talked about it, but it's always good to hear it from the manager himself. And basically, Arteta confirmed that Zinchenko and Martinelli will miss the rest of the season due to injury, which is obviously only 2 games at this point. He went on to say that Martinelli is a pretty nasty injury. We need to assess in the next week how long he will be out for. Now, I know a lot of people are looking to just ignore Arsenal at this point. The Premier League is over. They think they're going to be on the beach and stuff like that. But they do have 2 pretty nice fixtures to end the season in Forest away and Wolves at home. Plenty of opportunity to score goals in those games. Defensively, maybe you could ignore them because Saliba's out, Zinchenko as well. But if you need a cheap defender that's on paper got good fixtures, you shouldn't completely ignore Arsenal players. And I don't personally think there's going to be a huge amount of rotation. I think there will be earlier subs for those players that haven't played a huge role so far this season, like Fabio Vieira, Reece Nelson, Nketiah, etc. Maybe Smith Rowe as well. But I think the starting 11 will be kind of what we become accustomed to, right? When they play Nottingham Forest, the league won't be mathematically done, and then Wolves is the final home game of the season. Now, in terms of who's going to benefit the most from these two injuries, in defence, it's of course Kieran Tierney, their main other left back. There are some reports that he's going to Newcastle, but presumably if Zinchenko's out, he will start the next two games. He's only 4.6 million, can be quite attacking. I did have a quick look through the rest of the defenders, especially the names that I wasn't quite sure about. There is this guy, Lino Sousa, who hasn't played, I've definitely pronounced that wrong, hasn't played at all, but can play left back. So maybe final day of the season, Arteta gives him a run out. But surely if Tierney is leaving, they're going to give him the home game against Wolves anyway. So for 4.6 million, a fairly attacking defender and a pretty good defence who are missing some players, you could look at him. And then for Martinelli, it's of course Trossard, only 6.6 million. He is a differential, but over the next couple of weeks, it's going to feel like he's not, because everyone's now going to talk about him because Martinelli is out. But don't get it wrong, not enough people will bring him in that makes him suddenly mass owned. He's going to be a differential no matter what. So for 6.6 million, especially last day of the season when it's Wolves at home, I do like the look of him. And what I would say is keep your options open to kind of which players you might be able to go for in Game Week 38. So just think about that when you're making your Game Week 37 transfers. So it's not like Arsenal players are now must have and you have to rush out to get them, but I wouldn't ignore them completely. And they do now have a couple of differentials that could be nice for the last couple of games. So this is just a minor thing, but I know a lot of people are looking to bring in Eze either this week or next week because Crystal Palace have got two really nice fixtures to end the season, Fulham away and Nottingham Forest at home. And to be fair, he's just a good option in his own right. 5.6 million, fairly differential, decent player to buy. But I thought this was interesting from Roy Hodgson's press conference. He was asked whether Zaha will be available, and he said it's not looking that likely. I fear he won't play again this season. Now, why this is big for Eze is penalties, because Zaha has been first choice penalty taker. I know Eze took the last one, but I think he won it as well. But with Zaha out of the picture, presumably Eze will be first choice penalty taker. So 5.6 million, really good form since Roy Hodgson has been back in. He's been brought back into the team, done really well. Two great fixtures. There's not too much to dislike about him. Whether or not I would really bring him in ahead of a double game week player this week, possibly not, because that's just the way I like to play. But if you need someone that cheap and you're not worried about Brighton players or anything like that, he's definitely the one to go for. Alright, let's answer some of your questions. So is it safe to play Kepa in goal if the other option is a single game week goalkeeper? Kepa was dropped in the last match. Now I did look at the quotes that came out from Frank Lampard's press conference and I didn't see anything about goalkeepers. Mendy did start the last game. He didn't play particularly well, so there is a chance that Kepa comes in instead. But ultimately, unless you've got a spare transfer and a spare slot to go for De Gea or Steele, I think you might as well play Kepa. I wouldn't go to Edison. I think there's a real risk that he only plays once, and anyone else has only got a single game week anyway. So the worst case scenario is Kepa only plays once, which would be the same as your single game week goalkeeper anyway. Best case scenario is he plays twice, maybe nicks a clean sheet, which is very unlikely, by the way, but a possibility, I guess. We didn't think Brighton were going to get one against Arsenal, but even if he doesn't get a clean sheet in either game, that's double the opportunity to get save points. I wouldn't expect Kepa to come away with negative points. So I think in almost all scenarios, I would play Kepa ahead of my single game week goalkeeper. Because if he misses out in both games, your other goalkeeper comes off the bench anyway. So you either get one game from Kepa or one game from your other keeper. Best case scenario, you get 2 games from Kepa. So I would play him. And I think for most people, the other goalkeeper they've got is Raya, and he's got Spurs away anyway. So is there a chance that Brentford get a clean sheet? Absolutely. But I think most of us would always back Kane to score, especially at home. And I just don't think there's too many other goalkeepers that are that popular that people have combined with Kepa. Maybe if you had like a Pickford against Wolves or a Ramsdale against Forest, you could consider it. But I still think I would go for Kepa instead. So unless you got that transfer to go to De Gea or Steele, the better double game week goalkeepers, I would just stick with him and play him. So some people have got the dilemma that a lot of us had last week, whether or not to play Trent Alexander-Arnold. And this is the question. Would you play Trent over a double game week player like Diaz, Shaw or Estupiñán? Just a quick reminder about how good Trent has been recently. These are his points totals, 13 against Leicester. Then before that, it was 7, 7, 4, 5, 5, 9, 5. So he hasn't blanked since game week 30. Liverpool are on a run of 3 clean sheets in a row. And in that time, he's got 6 assists. And we've seen how attacking he can be in this new role. I mean, he's attacking in general, but that has continued when he's moved into midfield. You look at his expected goal involvement, 0.37, 0.39, 0.34. Very consistent. So I can see why people don't want to bench Trent. I would say there's 3 double game week defenders that I would definitely play ahead of him, and they are Estepinian, Dunk and Luke Shaw. I think all 3 of them are nailed to play both of those games in the double. We know how attacking Estepinian can be. Lewis Dunk is no slouch from corners, free kicks and stuff like that. And I know Brighton have got to play Man City at home, but they also get to play Southampton at home, which is one of the best fixtures you can get right now. They're already relegated, great chance of a clean sheet, and like I've said, both of those defenders are attacking enough to play ahead of Trent, in my opinion. If you've got a different Brighton defender, then they're not nailed on, in which case I would play Trent, but Estepinian and Dunk I would put ahead. I think with Luke Shaw, he's the only Man United defender that's absolutely nailed. I think there's a good chance of at least 1 clean sheet in the double, and if he plays centre-back, he's very good for bonus. If he plays left back, he's fairly attacking, and he does take some set pieces as well. So they are the only 3 that I would definitely play ahead of Trent. If you've got someone like Lindelof, which a lot of people picked up recently, you could risk to play him ahead. I know people are convinced that it's going to be one of the right backs and then Varane, Lindelof, Luke Shaw for the final 3 games. And it might well be. I do think there's a possibility of Luke Shaw left centre-back, Varane right centre-back at some point. But I don't know if the risk is so much that I would bench Lindelof in this double. So you could maybe put him ahead of Trent. Possibly, but no other Man United defenders. Definitely no Chelsea defenders, because they've got an awful double and they're just not really playing that well right now. So the trickiest ones are the Man City defenders. Now, if the league was wide open still, I would play the likes of Stones or Diaz ahead of Trent. No problem whatsoever. But we know that's not the case. And I think the scenario that needs to happen, where they're good for FPL and there's a high likelihood of them starting twice in the double, is just not going to happen, right? Because it would require Arsenal to beat Nottingham Forest and then Man City to draw 0-0 with Chelsea. Because in that situation, they still need to go and beat Brighton to secure the title. And obviously they've got a clean sheet against Chelsea. If it's 1-1 or 2-2, or they beat them, or they lose, it doesn't matter because you've lost the clean sheet or you've lost the chance of them starting the second game. So it's tricky. If you think differently to me, you think Diaz or a Kanji, someone like that you own, is definitely going to start twice, then I would risk them ahead of Trent. If you're not convinced, I would just play Trent ahead of them. So it's one of those strange weeks where there is a double game week, but we're in a situation where a lot of players either might play once or just not that good, right? Because, either they're going to play once because of just general rotation, or they're going to play once because they're about to win the league. So for me, Estepinian, Shaw and Dunk ahead of Trent, I think you could probably make a case that everyone else should possibly be benched and you should just play Trent instead. I don't know. Man City defender owners, let me know in the comments below what you're going to do. So who is the best differential captain to catch up with rank? I still have my triple captain available. Now, just as a side note, if you are going to play the triple captain chip this week, that is already a differential in itself because most people will have already used it. So if the gap you're trying to chase down, either for overall rank or mini league, isn't that big, and you think Haaland is just the best captain, forgetting about differentials, the chip could be a differential in itself. So if Haaland gets 15 points and I captain him, I get 30. If you triple captain, you get 45. So your chip is then worth 15 points, and that might be enough to close the gap that you're trying to chase down. If you've got a bigger gap, then you might need to go for a differential captain even with your triple captain chip in play, but that is just something to think about. The obvious captain that most people are going to go with is obviously Erling Haaland. Outside of that, I think the next best option with all the information we have right now is probably Bruno Fernandes, because I think Man United's fixtures are pretty good. Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home. He's almost certainly going to play as a number 10 in both games, and you can almost guarantee 160 to 180 minutes. Because Rashford is ill, according to Ten Hag. It doesn't like completely take him off the table, but it does put some doubts in play as to whether or not he will start that Bournemouth game. Now, you might turn around and say, well, hang on, if Rashford is yellow flagged, that means a lot of people that were going to captain him now won't. That makes him an even bigger differential. So you could look at it that way and just think, I'm going to take the risk. I'm not going to go for boring Haaland. I'm not going to go for guaranteed minutes Bruno Fernandes. And instead, I'm going to go for Rashford while no one's thinking about it. I'm also going to triple captain as well. And if he does start against Bournemouth and plays Chelsea, which he's very likely to do, then he could absolutely go big. So I would go from Haaland to Bruno, probably to Rashford. If you think Mahrez starts twice, again, he's a player that not many people are going to be looking at for captaincy. If you want my opinion, Mahrez is one of the most likely players for Man City to play twice, but I'm not sure how much money I'd be willing to bet on that, because it is just a little bit of a lottery given the kind of position the league is in right now. But again, he would be a huge differential. And McAllister on penalties, I think he's going to start both games in the double. He's just had his rest, so he'll almost certainly start the easier game against Southampton. You could look at him too. Outside of that, there's not really many other players in Game Week 37 I'd be willing to put my triple captain on, because you're really then looking at single Game Week players, possibly Salah at home to Aston Villa you could look at. You could take a punt on an Arsenal player, but I don't think anyone's doing that right now. So I would be looking at a double Game Weeker. I don't think you've missed the boat on Wilson, but I think the time to triple captain him would have been when he had 2 fixtures, right? Not now when he's just got Leicester. So I think you're probably looking at one of these 5 players on screen. If you're not going to go for Haaland, I think the next best option is probably Fernandes. The 2 puntier picks are Rashford and Mahrez, and then it's probably McAllister. Let me know below if you're going for any other captains outside of those 5. If you've got the triple captain left, when are you going to use it, and who are you going to use it on? If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning for the deadline stream.